where do we begin?
That shirt's fire.
That shirt is fire.
He's
Thank
got his
you.
Royal Sox shirt on.
Shout out to my friends at Homage.
Okay. Do they not make shirts that are a little bit bigger though?
All
Stop.
right.
Stop
Here
it.
we go.
Scott called. He wants his shirt back.
Can I? You know what? I actually want to start with. Let's start with Ron Washington. Okay, let's give him some love. It's his first manager gig in 10 years, and he signs with the Angels. We're going to talk to Mike DiGiovanna later about the difficult task of being the manager of the Angels when you have your owner dad breathing over your neck, telling you what to do with everything. But what do you think about the move? I mean, I don't think anybody's going to have something negative to say about this edition. Do you agree?
I'm with you, Scott. I think when you look at Ron Washington and you look at his time in Texas, those are some really successful teams. His last year before they moved on from Ron Washington, they weren't great, but you talk about back-to-back World Series appearances, and then it's been nearly a decade since he had gotten an opportunity to manage again. Goes down to Atlanta where, he helps guys like Dansby Swanson and Ozzie Albies and Freddie Freeman and Matt Olson and Austin Riley, turning him into a guy that is a plus defender over there at third base and a guy who's respected around the game. And to your point, you're never going to hear anything bad about Ron Washington. So good hire for the Los Angeles Angels. I don't know where this takes them in terms of their future, because I like you guys believe that Shohei Ohtani's time in LA is going to be over this offseason. And if that's the case, I think you're just kind of looking at a new era of Angels baseball. Where does that leave them? I think that remains to be seen, but a great opportunity for Ron Washington to have another opportunity to manage in the big leagues.
Is there any inclination that he really wanted to get back into managing? And with all the openings, is this the best fit for him? Because I feel like he is a energy winning guy, and I don't know that you're like, man, I can't wait to go to the Angels and finish 162 games.
I 100% hear what you're saying, Kratzy. I really do. I think one of the parts about what that makes it so interesting is there's only 30 of these jobs, right? And he's a guy that's been in the cycle year after year now, where it's like, oh, Ron Washington would be a good candidate for this team. He'd be a good candidate for this team. And if a team wants to make you a finalist and other teams just kind of want to talk to you, well, I'm going to talk to this team that wants to make me a finalist and potentially make me the manager of that team, of that ball club. And I think at the end of the day, it's, hey, I can get back into managing. I've got to be in Atlanta where I was a successful coach where, maybe perspective changes when you're not the guy making all the decisions. You could look and say, all right, I would do this differently. And, I did this differently back when I was in Texas. Maybe I should do it like this time, and take all that information from a successful organization down in Atlanta. And now you bring all that to Los Angeles with the Angels and hopefully bring that energy to an organization that really needs some energy right now.
Hey, I played for Wash in 2013. It was his next to last year. 2014, I think, was his last year in Texas, right? He was a great guy. He was fun as hell to play for. I mean, really treated people the right way. The one thing I took away from Ron Washington, though, was those meetings he had with us were off the chain, funny as hell. He'd get all mad and he'd start cussing, and it was so funny.
I heard he cusses like every other
word.
Oh
my gosh, it was so funny. And he'd be smoking his cigs.
Oh, like AJ.
Oh, man, he'd be hiding behind the corner.
Little heater.
Oh, between innings. I mean, he was unbelievable. Listen, I love Wash. Every time I see Wash, he is awesome. Gives me a big hug. I mean, listen, I don't know if he can turn around because, listen, he's 71 years old now. I don't know if anybody can turn around what the Angels have, but Ron Washington is going to make it a different clubhouse, a different culture. And I know this. He's going to make it fun as hell to go to the ballpark every day.
No, and that's what I think they need in Los Angeles, right? If the Shohei Ohtani era is over, which I think a lot of us believe that it is, and you're still going to have Mike Trout for the foreseeable future until he decides that he doesn't want to do that anymore, don't you need somebody that's going to make the 26 guys in that clubhouse believe, guys, we can win a ball game today? And to your point, if he's going to do that and he's going to bring some levity, but also, hey, guys, I know what we can do. I know the talent that we have in here. No, I don't think anybody's out there saying the Angels are going to be a world beater with Ron Washington as their manager. But I do think the value of having a guy that people believe in is really important, whether they're going to be a team that wins 75 games or 80 games or whatever they do, I think having a guy like a Ron Washington make people start to believe in that organization, in the Angels again, I think that's important.
Russ, do you think that we should have a neutral site World Series? Let's start there.
No, I don't. No, I don't.
Okay.
Scott.
So Scott Boras spoke yesterday, and obviously he spoke about his players, which,
Right.
we get all that, but it's more fun to kick around the big picture topics. I'm going to mix this one in there at the same time, because the second part, I have a lot to say here, and I usually don't. I hosted a good chunk of the draft for many years. It should not be during All-Star weekend. It's like you have to it's like going into a ball pit and it's like you dig and you find, and the draft is here right now. It just doesn't get the attention it should. It should be in Omaha. I don't know if NCAA and MLB haven't gotten along or whatever the fuck has led to that for so long. It's stupid, but it's just a bad time to have it. And I love the freaking draft. So that's my take on that. But I think most people care more about the World Series situation. So what did you think of those comments? And fellow agent, different agency, Vernon Wells, saying, no one cares, Bob, stop wasting characters, which he was saying to Nightingale, who was just reporting the news, but to me really meant he was telling Scott that he doesn't care about his opinion, right?
Yeah. All right. So as far as the neutral site World Series goes, horrible idea. I think all of us have been to the World Series before. The electric atmosphere that is there when you go to one location, then you fly to the next location. It's amazing. That shouldn't change. That's dumb. As far as the changing the draft, I do, like you mentioned, Scott, I think that is important, right? Because they used to have it in the middle of the summer and a lot of guys were playing in the College World Series. So you want to change it. I understand that. Then you move it to All-Star Week when it's at the beginning of All-Star Week. So it's that Sunday. And I kind of like that because it's kind of the thing that kicks off All-Star Week. And I think that's pretty cool. And like being in Seattle this year with the draft, and it was at the football field and the stadium next to T-Mobile Park, I actually really enjoyed it. I can understand your perspective, though, of saying, hey, these dudes need to be highlighted away from everything else where it's kind of like an afterthought. So do I think they've tried to improve on it? Yes. Can you keep making improvements to make sure that this next wave of MLB stars gets the proper love and attention? Yes.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think, listen, I used to love the draft when it was in early June. The problem that everyone I've talked to in MLB and in Scout say, well, these kids, especially college kids, would get distracted because they were in the College World Series. Oh, the draft is happening. Oh, guess what? You were drafted third overall, some pitcher. And then there's like, oh, he's a third draft pick overall, taking the mound. I mean, it didn't hurt Paul Skeens. It didn't hurt Dylan Cruz. It didn't hurt, a ton of guys. Wyatt Langford in the College World Series this year. But the other thing that I don't understand is why they've done this is you used to be able to get a half of season in for your players after you drafted them, right? It'd be the first week in June where you still had some of June, July, August, and now with the way the minor leagues are set up, you could even get some September time for these kids and get them a somewhat, but they eliminated short season. They eliminated the short season league, and therefore by saving money, now they're like, we can move the draft back. These guys can go to our complex, hang out like Paul Skeens, we'll just hang out here, throw some bullpens. Instead, you used to get these guys, they'd go right into A-ball. They'd go right into short season and get their feet wet in professional baseball. That's gone. That's why the draft timing had to move. I don't like where it is now. I wish it was back. Maybe do it at the end of the World Series.
The day after
the College World Series in Omaha. You got most of the people there. They'd hang around. There'd be, I don't know, just different ideas. Try something different because the way they're doing it now, listen, I went to the draft at the MLB Network studios and sat through it. It was boring as hell. It was I'm sitting there like, oh my god.
Well, we're going to change that at FC.
Right, but they need to come up with a better way. I like that it's in person. I love that the people are there. But gosh, there's got to be a better way, Russ. So come up with it and be the next commissioner.
No, I don't want those problems. I don't want those problems being the commissioner. But I think you
want that paycheck, though.
Not wrong. Not wrong. I think there have been some additions like the draft lottery. You talk about excitement, things being boring as hell. Going to the winter meetings and seeing the draft lottery for the first time last year, it was an event. Like people were amped up in that room. And so like you're starting to see incremental steps. It's like, all right, how can we make this more like the NBA draft? How do we make this more like the NFL? You'll never be that because the sports are different. But like, can you make appropriate steps to try to improve. And I think the idea of you guys are not the first ones that I've heard say, yo, take that thing to Omaha. And I think it makes sense. AJ, to your point about the development of players and like not being able to have that half a season in the minor leagues, I think that's why you're seeing more teams now being aggressive, where Wyatt Langford finished the season in AAA and like held his own, right? Nolan Shanaway was playing in the big leagues with the Angels. So I think teams are trying to figure out what works for them. And obviously that depends on the player. But yeah, you're going to see some of these guys that aren't top 10, top 15 picks going to suffer when it comes to development because they can't get that time.
And that's where a ton of value is. You're paying for the Wyatt Langfords. You're paying for all your first rounders. The guys down in the draft, while they don't hit as often,
yeah,
you're getting a lot of value. So speaking of value, which Chicago topic would you like to talk about first? Would you like to talk about how Pedro Grifol all of a sudden doesn't like the team that he loved? Or would you like to talk about the fact that Craig Counsell absolutely undercut David Ross's job?
Let's talk about both, but let's get to Getz and Pedro Grifol first, because something for me that I think is really interesting as a reporter, I love honesty. I think honesty is something that people don't really understand the value. If you're honest, you can save yourself a lot of headaches. And I think the more people start to realize that, the better off they will be. I think I have no problem. Obviously, I'm not a fan with Chris Getz, GM of the White Sox, saying, I don't like our team, right? Because when you look at the way the White Sox played, why would somebody like that team that finished the 2023 season? And if you're supposed to get this team where you want it to go, being honest about that and saying, I don't like this team and we need to make changes, which was the entire quote. Like, we need to make steps to improve this roster. I don't see anything wrong with that. And I don't think that there's any GMs that would disagree if they were in a similar situation. The part about Pedro Grifol, hey man, like, I think it was at the end of the year for the White Sox. I think it was a lot of just trying. Can we get to the end of the season? Can we get to October 1st where everybody can just go home and then we can come back in 2024 with different faces, different characters, and try to go from there. The White Sox are in an interesting position, and we talked about them throughout the year. Like, we all saw it coming. I think that's my thing with the White Sox. Like, we all saw the way the season was going to go for them. And now, after everything that's happened, where you move on from Tim Anderson and, Pedro Grifol returns and Kenny and Rick Hahn are no longer in power in the front office, and you have Chris Getz, who has kind of been there and kind of seen the way this thing has gone in the minor leagues, and now he's the guy. I don't think it's going to be an easy couple of years for the White Sox, just because when you look at that minor league system, it's not great. And then you look at the major league roster, also not great. So Chris Getz is going to have some work to do.
All right. So now let's talk about how in 2014, Renteria got bounced. And you said Rick Renteria when Joe Madden became available as they began their winning window.
Yeah.
Is this really the next winning window?
Yes. I think that's what the Cubs believe. I think when you look at, and we talked about it last week, where you asked me, what's the biggest surprise? And I didn't know it was this. I said, one of these managerial hires. I would have loved to have said, hey, breaking right here on Foul Territory. I was as shocked as everybody, right? And I think when you talking to people in the industry this week, I think people were blown away that a team that had a manager that seemed to be perfect for the job in David Ross said, Rossi, we love you, but we have a guy that we believe can take us to the next level right now. And I think time and time again, you would hear, Jed Hoyer say, we believe that Rossi is going to be a terrific manager in the big leagues, right? But if a guy becomes available that you already know is a top 5 manager in the big leagues, if you're going to be one of these teams that is constantly in contention and you think that's going to be the difference between you being here and being here, I can understand them wanting to make that move. Now, to that point, I don't think that makes it any easier for a guy like David Ross, who had been in that front office, who had learned under Theo and Jed, and then became the guy in the seat. And people in that organization love David Ross. and rightfully so. Like obviously everything he did in 2016 team, getting that first World Series, first time in 108 years. But seeing the way that players responded to him, seeing the way that coaching staff responded to him, it was surprising. And I imagine for Jed, especially Jed and Carter Hawkins, that was the toughest part of this decision, was having to tell David Ross, hey, we're moving on and going to somebody else.
So why is this the winning window? Like, I get it, 2014. I mean, your starting lineup for the 2013 Cubs: Wellington Castillo, Anthony Rizzo, Darwin Barney, Starlin Castro, Luis Valbuena, Alfonso Soriano, David De Jesus, and don't forget Nate Shearholtz. Like, so that was their 2013 compared to 2023 starting lineup. What are they pushing? What are they pushing forward? Who are the pieces that are coming up? Who's the Javier Baez? Who's the Chris Bryants? Who is the who else was coming up through that time?
John Lester. Where's John Lester? Where's John Lackey? Where's Kyle Schwarber? There's a whole list of guys.
Kyle Schwarber was coming up with them.
Right. So when you look at it, so they hired Joe Madden October 2014, and then next season was 2015 when they did all their winning. You sign Lester, right? Schwarber comes up, does his thing. Chris Bryant comes up, Javi, all those guys. You already had Rizzo. I look at the Cubs this time around, 9 years later. You went out and you signed Dansby Swanson, right? You went out 2 years ago and you signed Seiya Suzuki. You brought him over. And then now you bring Taillon in last year. You look at this offseason in free agency. Obviously, Shohei Ohtani is the big fish out there. And I've talked to you guys about it. I had been told by some sources that the Cubs would be involved in the Shohei Ohtani bidding. Will they get him? I think there are going to be a lot of teams involved that want Shohei Ohtani. Makes perfect sense. But this is the time to strike, right? You don't bring Dansby Swanson in and tell him, hey, man, we're just going to be like, okay, and not spend money. The Cubs have been a team that, after you move on from Baez and Bryant and Rizzo, have not spent money. And I think the move to bring in Dansby and Seiya Suzuki a couple years ago, you sign Ian Happ to an extension, you sign Nico Horner to extension, guys that you believe are going to be part of your future. And then you bring in Craig Counsell to say, hey, this is our manager for the next 5 to 7, 8, 9 years. And this is the sign for everybody out there that the Chicago Cubs are back to being that team. Now, you have to show that, but I think the Counsell move was the one to say, hey, we're not playing around with people anymore.
Yeah, and then also within their division, they're like, okay, Milwaukee, you don't want to pay an extra few $1,000,000 for your manager, or didn't want to throw him the bag while you had him for 1,000,000,000 years. We like him better than everyone else, and he's available right now. So we're going to, swing around a little bit here and show you how much more money we have and resources. So that's their choice. And obviously Milwaukee could have matched it or could have obviously beaten the offer. That's what happens. So here's the aftermath for me. Serious question. These guys have kind of been giving me shit for it. Do you have anyone that you can talk to within the Brewers organization about why David Ross wouldn't be a candidate for the job? I'm dead serious here, not just for the spite. These guys have just been shaking their head. I'm serious, troll. Russ. I'm not a troll. I'm not a troll. Russ, can you help me out here? If he did a good job and he knows all the inside secrets about the division rival, and he would have the biggest chip on anyone's shoulder ever, and they've displayed that they can pay some money for the manager position, they think that it's got some value, right? Doesn't everything add up that he should at least be a candidate? Shouldn't he get an interview if he wants to?
Sure, a candidate for sure. You weren't the first person that brought that to me, Scott. Like that day, I had a couple people text me like, "Wouldn't it be crazy?" And I said, "Yes, yes, it would." Just if not for the entertainment value. I understand that, AJ. I understand that.
And David Ross,
why?
David Ross at the end wasn't considered that great of a manager. Ask any Cub fan out there. As much as they love David Ross, they're going to say he at the end, the last year or so,
his bullpen.
They were like, no, we don't want David Ross.
They lost 15 of their last 22, right? If they don't do that and they make the postseason, are we even here? I have a hard time believing that we are if they make it to the postseason. But I think he should at least get why not talk to as many people as possible? Even if you don't hire somebody, does it hurt you to talk to different candidates?
It does. Ask Jerry Reinsdorf and the White Sox. They don't talk to anybody.
Well, that's a personal problem, AJ. That's a personal problem.
That's not, personal to me. It's not personal to me.
Nah, it's personal.
No.
It's personal.
Yeah, it's truthful.
No, because
It's
you're
kinda
a fan,
personal.
You're a homer, so you're
It's a little
following
personal.
them, which you're allowed to do.
I'm allowed to be a fan, aren't
No, for sure.
100%.
But don't say it's not personal when it is.
I? It's not personal. It's just
You and my dad, sad.
They're the only two left. We might be, especially after what happened today, we might be the only two left.
Yo, I was the one that had to break it to him.
To your dad?
Yes, I texted him this morning. As soon as I saw, I said, "Dad, you're not gonna believe it, man." He's like, you know what? I'm gonna read the text message from my dad,
Mr. Dorsey.
morning. It's great. Dad goes, no, 5 O's, exclamation points. This organization is a flat out disaster. Ricky Dorsey.
You know what else is a disaster?
Yeah.
When AJ tries to talk to you about the Chicago Bears. So let's finish with this. A live
why do you do
update
this to me,
on
man?
the poll. Do you want to hear AJ talk about the Bears on foul territory? Options: yes, no, or it's better than when he talks about Florida. 76% say no. Stop it.
He gone.
And he's gonna
What
do
did,
it
what did Rock
anyway.
say? It doesn't matter what you say. Because I still want to know, can the Bears cover against Carolina tonight on Thursday
Wait,
Night
It's
Football?
still going up. 78%. It's still going up.
Again, it doesn't matter.
Yes, AJ, yes, they can. Because the only team that I think is worse than them is the Carolina
But the
Panthers.
question is, do they lose on purpose to get two better? Because if they win,
And we're
could
out of
affect
time.
their draft stock. I mean, there's
And
a lot
we're
of questions
out
here,
of
Russ.
If
And
they
we're out of
win,
time.
it doesn't matter because they have Carolina's pick. Carolina's 1-6. They're going to be terrible anyway. You're going to have the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah, hopefully.
Russ, the Durham Bulls are pretty good. You're talking about Carolina? Good to talk to you, dude. We'll grab you next week, my
Ba-dum-bum.
friend.
We'll
Bye,
talk Bulls
guys.
basketball next
Later.
week, Russ.